in the summer of 2019, there was a situation where one YouTuber was accusing another of basically bullying him. And YouTube caught enough flack about this that they expanded their community guidelines to define what they considered to be hate speech and bullying, such that it would then include the behavior that was being described as bullying, and so they could penalize that person. And so when they put out a press release describing that they had changed their community standards, they basically said, we removed or demonetized 1,000 channels that we now feel fit into the revised community standards. And so in that moment, right when they announced that, my video of those two people confronting the Holocaust denier was removed from YouTube. And my entire channel was demonetized. Not just that video, but all of my videos could no longer make revenue. And I actually managed to get a lot of media attention about this. I got Forbes to write about it. I got ABC to write about it, basically talking about how it is very, very clear what the mistake was, right? So as you're pointing out, algorithms, as opposed to just people, they are looking for keywords. A computer is not making that distinction. So in the case of what happened to me, it probably saw that kind of like trigger word. It hears the words of the person who was in the video, and it doesn't know how to distinguish between the views of the person filming it and publishing it and context of why they're publishing it versus just if a computer transcribes the words and then sees essentially a string of text and describes, oh, that's policy violative.
Yeah.
And so that went down and erroneously. And I pushed, even with all that media attention, I continued to push YouTube about it, tagging them constantly on Twitter, telling people to tweet at them, everything like this. And it took them until the beginning of the following year for them to remonetize me, the beginning of 2020. And so it was a total of actually 7 months that I was demonetized. And then they said, oh, it was your channel was demonetized in error. We apologize. I didn't get any money back. Right?
For 7 months.
But 7 months of demonetization resulted from that. And so then I thought, okay, fine. Now that they've fixed that, hopefully I won't have this kind of issue again. Well, I was kind of wrong about that too. So when January 6th happened, YouTube made a very rapid change of policy. And so YouTube's stated reason for this is they basically said, well, we've realized that that people promoting what they call election integrity disinformation are inadvertently or inadvertently, but that they are promoting violence possibly. And so basically from January 6th on, YouTube's policy became that videos that have claims of election fraud go down. And so what ended up happening and of course, I have no videos where I claim anything like that. I've never told my audience that the election was stolen. Again, I'd feel comfortable saying I've seen no evidence the election was stolen. But with that being said, on January 6th, I filmed Trump's entire speech, right? So Donald Trump gave a 70-minute speech, and he was later impeached for incitement of insurrection, right? And so my 70-minute video shows beginning to end from where I was standing, which was the National Mall, the perspective of basically the biggest bulk of people listening to that speech, who at the end of it responded to Trump saying, and now we're all going to march down to the Capitol. And so this is the people who heard him say that and then subsequently did it. And so I, of course, as an independent journalist, am not going to take a position on whether or not Trump should have been found guilty on incitement of insurrection. But it is without any doubt that the footage captured a historic moment. This is the moment that Trump is allegedly inciting the people who he is allegedly inciting, right? This is capturing him doing it and the people responding to it. And there are moments that would be very critical to our understanding of that event. For example, when he said that the elections in the United States are worse than third world countries, his own words, people responded, fight for Trump, right? Some might argue that that actually is evidence of the fact that these people are hearing from him an incitement, that he's inciting them by telling him these things. But on the night that the House of Representatives delivered the articles of impeachment to the Senate. He, so this is the moment that Donald Trump would consider himself to have been impeached. There was a little bit of this, like, Trump used to say this thing that, like, oh, it's only impeachment once it gets to the Senate. So if you're to agree with Trump's definition, then the moment that Trump was impeached, that night, YouTube took down my video of the speech. And they said that my video of the speech was in itself election disinformation. And so, of course, I vehemently disagreed with this. Oh, and by the way, they demonetized my entire channel again.
Oh, God.
In the process.
So frustrating.
And so I vehemently disagreed with this. And I guess I sort of benefited from a news cycle in which everybody was very deeply interested in all things January 6th. So Fox News actually wrote an entire story about this. They also talked about how Status Quo, a progressive independent outlet, which I would consider myself very friendly with the people who run it, often collaborating. We have a couple of freelance contributors in common, et cetera. But they had footage from January 6th as well. That they had live streamed that was deleted from the internet, and some of that is basically lost forever for the same reason, because the people at the Capitol were saying that the election was stolen. And so after Fox News reported on it, YouTube ultimately said, "Oh, this was," in their own words, they said it was an over enforcement. So they remonetized the channel, but they did leave the video down. And the logic they said that they explained is that in general, for a lot of the standards of YouTube on violence, hatred, etc., there is what I consider to actually be very correctly an ESDA exception: educational, scientific, documentary, or artistic. Right. So if you are posting a video, for example, where somebody says Sig Heil or says something hateful about a certain race or something, YouTube is, in my opinion, actually accurately pointing out that there's obviously a difference when it's because of education, science, documentary, or art, right? So if you're making a music video and there's some character in it who says something hateful, and then that person goes and burns in hell or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or you have a documentary that is, showing sequences of Nazi Germany, or, an education, it is educational if you had a Hitler speech on YouTube that's not meant to promote Hitler, but so that you understand what he's saying, whatever.
Yeah.
These are what the ESDA exception is for. But what YouTube came up with is that there is a new problem, which is that COVID and elections, these are the only two issues where they say the ESDA exception is not just blanketly true just by being part of an ES or D or A thing. What they said is that in these situations, if you have footage where anybody says one of those things, you have to have a countervailing view. So it's not just that I, as an impartial observer, document the Trump speech, but I have to actually actively say, essentially, Trump is wrong, right? I have to point them toward a different source. And so what I started doing was basically overlaying a link to a government website, cisa.gov/rumor control, which basically is a government website describing election integrity. And so while at least I have that solution now, at the time there was no such proposition that you had to do this. And so I know I'm being long-winded by giving a few examples, but there was one other very, very frustrating example of this that I think will show how stupid the way that YouTube's computers handle this, and kind of how dense they're being. So on Inauguration Day, so 2 weeks after January 6th, the whole city is very locked down. And whereas there would normally be lots of activism pro and against the incoming president on an Inauguration Day, this was a very locked down day. Military everywhere, very few protesters, whatever. But one protest outside the inauguration was by basically like a religious hate group, people with the signs that say God hates, and then expletives about gay people and so forth. And something really fascinating happened. A handful of people started yelling at them, telling them that they're wrong and stuff. But one of the people who did that was actually apparently a Trump supporter. And so out of my 8-minute video of people confronting this hate group, there was one person who said, and I remember from quote, I don't even have it in front of me, but I remember what he said. He says, "Correct your hate," he yells at them. But then he says, "I still believe the election was stolen, but you, sir, are preaching the wrong form of Christianity." And earlier there was a woman who was not wearing what I guess this church considered to be, good enough clothing or enough clothing or something. And he said, that woman that you just called a whore, that's a woman. And he says, a human fucking being. And so out of all of that quote, correct your hate, I still believe the election was stolen, but you, sir, are preaching the wrong form of Christianity. That woman that you called a whore, that's a woman. That's what he says. YouTube took down my entire 8-minute video of that and gave me a suspension for a week. Because he, in one part of one of those sentences, he said, I still believe the election is stolen. So one person, amidst a whole video of an entire situation, one person saying, I still believe the election was stolen. One random person yelling those words without me repudiating that out loud myself is grounds for the entire video's deletion and punishment, basically.